Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to give a few announcements for today. So first of all, we have no class on Monday, so that's great. Our next time we'll be meeting will be next Thursday, and it will be a catch-up class for part of it. So we'll do it kind of how we did it last time with the last speaker meeting, where we're going to be meeting with Mike Northrup, who is who's on the company team, and he's going to be there and answer any questions you might have about apprenticeship opportunities or liftoff or just anything in terms of launch code and career placement. So definitely come prepared for that with any questions you might have for Mike. And if you want to get seen, it'd be a great chance to put your camera on if you don't usually have it on. And that kind of leads me into one more topic I just wanted to touch on, which is engagement during studio, which is kind of a tricky thing when it comes to remote learning a lot of the time. And I just want to relay an anecdote from my time, my cohort at Launch Code. When I went, there was one student in particular who they didn't know the answer most of the time, and they were far from the best coder in the cohort, and but they were always active and they were always participating in any studio review. They always had questions. They always kind of showed up and had their camera on and were ready to participate at all times. And you know, I was a little bit more reserved. I would speak up more than most people, but I definitely was not nearly to the level of this person, who I was like, man, this person, they're not understanding this concept, they're not understanding this concept. And I was kind of seeing my error in retrospect, because this person was so persistent and so adamant about being involved in the process of learning that as soon as liftoff ended, I think they had an apprenticeship within 1 month. And I think that has been commensurate with the rest of my experience as a TA and now as a CEM, is watching the people who are visible and who are active participants are invariably the people that get placed the quickest. We prioritize learning to code, and that's obviously indispensable when you're getting into web development. But we also want to make everyone here as marketable as they can possibly be. And one part of that is being able to communicate about your code, first of all, and being able to work collaboratively with a group of people, and just being comfortable being on camera, because I know it can definitely be daunting. I would recommend if you find it that way, but if you're looking to push yourself to get on camera more, there's always a hide self view, which I take advantage of a lot. But yeah, I just want to kind of stress the importance of trying to make the most out of studio time and really trying to build that community, especially after the course is over. Y'all are going to be each other's best asset. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. In studio time, if you usually are quieter or are hesitant to participate, maybe push yourself to participate more. And if you're usually a leader during studio time, if you're usually one of the people who's consistently trying to fill the gap in silence, it might be good to try to bring other people in, or just to let it fall on other people, give other people an opportunity to step forward and lead the studio. And yeah, that's about all I had for today. I'm going to get in the habit of leaving kind of a summary of whatever announcements I have for the day in announcements. So if you happen to miss the beginning of a class any day, just look in the announcements channel. It'll cover basically what I've gone over. But with that, I have to run and help out another cohort, but I'll still be around through Slack until about 7:30, and then I have to throw this computer in my car and move to St. Louis. So thanks, and back to you, Carrie.
Thanks, Colin. Okay, I'm going to get my screen back up because we are going to do another Kahoot. I'll give you guys, the information is in Slack, but I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds to get yourself in here if you want to participate. So let me do that first. But I want to definitely, echo what Colin was saying. Every job I've worked for the last 3 years has been remote, and I have had to build these skills of being on camera and participating constantly. It's a wild world if you spent most of your life working with in an office with people all the time. It's a shift, and I'm going to tell you guys a secret. It may sound a secret, and I may have even mentioned it before, but I'm an introvert with social anxiety. You may not have known that about me. The fact that I am up here teaching now will tell you how much I've had to overcome. And that has transpired through a series of events in my life. But the last few years in particular, I've had to push myself pretty hard to overcome a lot of things and to get to the point where I feel comfortable, getting up and talking about my work and my coding and, coding in front of people, which is a skill you will build in liftoff. But you should start building it now. I mean, you guys are participating together in studio and helping each other, figure stuff out. It's just a great opportunity to get comfortable with that, because you're going to do that in the real world with your coworkers. You will. So, absolutely encourage you to, start making use of this opportunity in a very supportive environment to build those skills now. Absolutely. Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get the music back on because it's kind of fun. I don't know if you guys, can you hear that okay? Is it too loud? Can you still hear me over it? Okay, all right. So we'll get started and have some fun with this. All right, class 3. We're going to recap last class's material here. Which of the following is not true about a Java array? I gave plenty of time on this one. I guess not everybody's answered yet. They're premature. Here it comes. All right, 5 seconds. There we go. Yes, so this is tricky because as you learned last class, arrays are a little different in Java. They have some interesting restrictions. So they have to be fixed size. They can be created without specifying the contents. You can specify an empty array as long as you specify the size. All elements do have to be the same type, but you do not have to import the array class like you do array list and hash map. Array can be used directly because the syntax is just different. Okay. So Marcus in the lead. True or false? An array list is Java's collection type for storing key value. False. Good job, guys. That would be a hash map. That is for key value pairs. All right, Marcus retains the lead. Quiz, multi-select. Which of the following are valid methods of the array list class? Yeah, okay. So I had a feeling this would trip people up. So add and size are both array list classes. Put is actually for hash maps. All right. True or false? An array list can be sorted using collections.sort. That is true. Good job. All right. Multi-select. Which of the following are valid methods of the hash map class? Good. Yeah, key set and entry set. For value set, it's actually value or values, plural, but there's no set on the end. And for length, I believe it is size. And I'm sitting here second guessing myself and I'm going, oh man, did I get that wrong? But yeah. Okay. Marcus retains the lead. Java syntax for if, else if, and else blocks not the same as JavaScript syntax. Is that true or false? That is false. They are pretty much the same. I mean, really, the only distinction I can think of is that the fact that the triple equals operator doesn't exist, but that has to do with that condition that you're setting. As far as the blocks themselves, the syntax is exactly the same. Okay. Which of the following is not a keyword used inside a switch statement? Yeah, great job. That's absolutely correct. Default is basically the else of the switch statement. All right. Strongly there, Marcus. See, I don't know if anybody can catch you at this point. You'd have to like quit now. Which type of loop is best if you want to make sure it runs once, but don't know how many more iterations are needed? do while loop. It'll do it once, and then it evaluates whether it should do it again. Great. Okay, 2 more. Which type of loop allows you to declare a local variable for looking at one item at a time while looping? Yeah, I just realized that that question might be a little bit tricky because I wasn't really talking about declaring an index, like a for I equals with the for loop, but technically that is a local variable. So sorry about that. But for each loop is correct. Okay. True or false? The map class is needed for looping through key value pairs in a hash map. That is true. Yeah, because it has a special, some special syntax that lets you type a single key value pair. So then it can access the keys and values individually. If you are just looping through the key set or just looping through the values, then you don't have to use the map class, but you do if you want to loop through the pair. Pairs, plural. All right, here we go. 3rd place, Brad S. Congrats, Brad. 2nd place, Adam S. Congrats, Adam. 1st place, no big surprise here, is Mark. And honorable mention goes to Bubs and RS. Great job, guys. All right. Yes, we're gonna leave. Okay, we have a limited amount of time with which to conduct the rest of the lecture, so we're gonna get going here. All right, so chapter 4, we were talking about classes and objects. We're going to kind of cover the fundamentals today, and then part 2 will be the next class that we have on the 23rd, the next regular class that we have. So announcements, lecture, studio review, same old, same old. I mentioned this last time, but if you want to code along with the lecture recordings, I'm making sure this unit that there's always starter code with the to-dos in the main branch of my repo with all the examples. And then you can switch the solution branch if you want to see the final solution. Colin pretty much already covered the dates, and I've covered them the last couple classes, but no class on Monday, catch-up class on Thursday with Mike coming from the company team, and then graded assignment 1 deadline is Monday the 23rd, which as of tonight, you'll know everything you need to know for that. Okay, so let's talk about classes in Java. We're talking about the basics, access modifiers, encapsulation, constructors and methods. And then I'm going to talk for a second about designing classes, because that's actually what you're doing for your studio tonight. Okay, so Java, as we stated before, is all about object-oriented programming. So up until now, you've been writing just the Java class that's needed with the main method so you can execute code and run your program. And that's necessary because everything in Java is based in classes. But we're going to focus tonight on writing classes that are intended as patterns for objects, which is what you've done before in JavaScript. So this is kind of the heart of this object-oriented programming concept. You define a class, and then you can create multiple objects that are instances of that class with their own unique information. So, tonight we're going to be kind of looking at this book class that, you can have Contact by Carl Sagan and Nemesis by Isaac Asimov and 1984 by George Orwell. You can tell I like my sci-fi classics. Yeah, so, basic vocabulary, syntax, that's good to know. Data stored for each object of a class is known as a field or an instance variable. So you'll hear Java developers talk about fields a lot more often than they'll say property. The term property is used, but it's kind of reserved for fields that users can set values for. It's a slight distinction. It's a little bit nebulous sometimes, but generally speaking, we're going to use the word field when we're talking about the data that's stored. So any actions that you can take with an object of the class are known as methods. Methods are how you define the behavior of the data, or set the values, or get the values of the data. So unless values need to be passed to a constructor in order to instantiate an object, you can actually leave the constructor out and there will be a default constructor. So in this example on the right, you can see we've got this library class that has an array list of books, and we have this method that's add book, and there's no constructor because there's no need to pass any data to instantiate an object, a library object, but we have a field and we have a method. So that's kind of going to be the basics there. And yeah, there we go, field, method. Okay, so this keyword, when is this required? Because you may have noticed I didn't use it on the previous one. You can always use it when you're referring to a field or method of the class, but you actually don't have to. And really the only time you would have to is if you have to differentiate between the name of the field and the name of some sort of local variable you've got, where there might be a conflict. But you can also avoid that just by using a different name. That being said, this is how you do use it. So you can see here that I've got this field title for the book. And so, the get title method has no parameter. So I can just say return title and it knows to refer to the field. But in the set title method, it has a parameter that has the same name, string title. So I have to differentiate. So that's where I use this dot title to refer to the field, and then use title to refer to that local variable that's in the parameter. This is very similar to the way constructor works. You've seen that in JavaScript. Sam, you got a question?
Yeah, I just want to ask, so for that particular set of code, you would need a constructor for that. Is that right? Because
I'm leaving a constructor because we're not there yet. This book class is going to have quite a lot to it. So you're going to continue to see bits and pieces of it where I'm just pointing out specific things, but you're right, it will have a constructor.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, yeah, so there's that keyword just to differentiate between the field and the local variable. Okay, so access modifiers. You may have seen this public, modifier floating around, and now you're starting to see private. And it's like, and when do you use them? When do you not use them? This is always confusing to students, always, always, always. So I want to try to make this as clear as I can. When you use the public access modifier, it specifically allows a field or method to be available anywhere. So not just inside the class and not just inside the package that the class is in, but anywhere outside of that. Anybody who's using your code can access that variable if it's marked public. But if you use the private access modifier, then it's extremely restricted. It means only the current class can use it. You can only reference it inside that class, and it's not going to be available to anybody else, not even other classes in the same package. But if you don't use a modifier at all, or if you use the protected keyword specifically modifier, but they mean the same thing basically. It just means that it's a default. So it can be used anywhere inside the package, just not outside that. And that's very convenient because it still keeps it protected in a public sense, but it allows you to access it from other classes in that same package. So in this example I've got here, you can kind of see, oh yeah, one more bullet point. Always use the most restrictive. That's a good rule just for security purposes. Keep it as restricted as possible. But if you need it somewhere, make it available. But otherwise, making things private is always a good idea, especially your fields. So here's an example where we've got this title, and this is the same example from the previous slide, but here we're just going to focus on these access modifiers. So private means title can only be referenced from inside this class. I'm not going to be able to do like, book.title from another class. Public has no restrictions. So from anywhere, I'll be able to say, I want to get the title of the book, and I can call get title on the instance of the book class. And then set title means I can use it anywhere within the package. So I'm going to allow it to be set from outside the class, but I don't want it to be set outside the package. So I'm going to kind of keep it contained and protected. And that was because I left off, private or public. I just left it off. Okay, so this is important for this concept of encapsulation, which is essentially this concept core to object-oriented programming that keeps your relevant code together per class and per package in a nice, neat, tiny way where it's only the things that belong to that class are in the class, only things that belong to the package are in the package. And you use these access modifiers to allow changes only in the places they're truly necessary. Like I said, always choose the most restrictive modifier. And so to that end, fields should almost always be private. And then you can use these special methods called getters and setters to access them outside the class. From outside the class So again, this is, the same as we have before. Use inside the class only is private, no restrictions, or if there's no modifier at all, you can use it anywhere in the package. So, but this is where we kind of point out that what's really going on here is get title is a getter and set title is a setter. And this is a very common thing. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. How to write getters and setters. So the convention get field name and set field name, that's very universal. And there, your textbook actually points out that there are some like libraries and systems out there that assume you're using those exact, get field name, set field name, and it'll break if you don't do it that way. So generally speaking, you want to use these conventions. And then for Booleans, the getter convention is field name. Let's see. So reasons why you might use getter and setters. You want to add behavior when the data is retrieved or set. You want some extra lines of code to execute while that's happening. Maybe you want to add some validation to your setters. And then also, you might want the access for a setter to be different from the access for the getter. So I've got this example here. Apparently I have in there twice. Okay, there we go. So I've got this example here with the getter and the setter, and wow, I didn't mean to do that. But yeah, you can see that the public, the getter is public, so that it can be accessed from anywhere, because it's okay. You can let people go get the information. That's not going to harm anything. But you're going to restrict the setter to be just within the package so that you can kind of control where it can happen from. Okay, Ian, you have a question?
Yeah, it was about the access management.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand what you're saying insofar as, like, in this one string, the set title can only be accessed in the package that it's in.
Mm-hmm.
But if you instantiate book in a different package, since there's an instance of that class there in that different package, would you be able to do set title, or would you not be able to?
Because the class is public.
Yeah.
I believe the answer would be you couldn't from there. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Okay.
But that's an excellent question. I have not tested that. I've never tried to do that, I don't think. So yeah, it's a very good question, but I would have to say the answer would be no. You'd be more restricted on what you can access, because that's strictly what that means. If you set it to where it's protected or default behavior, that method can't be used outside that package.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about constructors for a second, because this is a little definitely different from JavaScript in some ways. There's no special keyword. In JavaScript, you use this keyword constructor that was like a special method of its own. But instead, what you do in Java is you just name it the same as the class and make sure it has no return type. So most methods that you write in Java, you have to, specify the type of the return value, but you don't do that. So as long as those two things are true, it's named the same as the class and it has no return type, Java recognizes it as a constructor. So you do need to type your individual parameters, which will probably look very similar to you as the way you did it in TypeScript. And when you're initializing fields with a constructor, you use this keyword if necessary to avoid those variable name conflicts. So again, in this example, I've got, the class name is book. So to create the constructor, I'm going to call it, public book, and give it that exact name. And then I've typed my parameter title as a string. And let me go back. And then, I just didn't have any underlines here for this part, but yeah, this dot title equals title, just because again, that parameter is title. So I have to differentiate between the two if I'm going to do it that way. I'm about to show you examples of ways that you don't always have to do it that way. Actually, I may have done it on previous slides. We'll see. Okay. Yeah, not on this one. We'll get there. Okay. So constructors have this concept called overloading. You may remember that in JavaScript, if you wanted to have default like optional parameters, you could give them default values and you could do it right there, like in the parameters, but you can't do that with Java. So instead, to have optional parameters, you just define additional constructors with the same name and just give them a different, combination of the parameters. And you can simplify the subsequent ones by taking the one that has all of the needed, the biggest number of parameters, and just set, call that constructor from inside the class and set those values. So here's an example of that. Wow. Okay. No underlines. Got it. Okay. Sorry, guys. I've got these three fields: title, author, and num pages. And I want to be able to instantiate objects of the book class here by, going ahead and specifying all three of those: title, author, and num pages. If I have all three, pieces of information, then great, I'll go ahead and set them. So this dot title equals title, this dot author equals author, etc. But let's say that in some cases, I may not have the number of pages, but I still want to be able to create an object. I can create the second constructor here with public book, and then just do the title and the author, leave the num pages off. And then from inside there, I could list it out with just this dot title equals title, this dot author equals author, and then do like this dot num pages equals 0. But I can actually just simplify it by calling the other constructor and say this, and then pass in title, author, and 0. And that's where that default value then goes for the one that I'm not wanting to have to pass in. Does that make sense? This can be a little bit confusing at first. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? Yeah, Brad.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, how does the code know, like if I call book, like which constructor to use? Does it just know based on how many variables I pass in?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, this just makes it where either is valid. So if you leave off the third one, it's going to use that second constructor and automatically assign 0 as the value for num pages.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it is. It makes it really super clear. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Okay, so last little bit here to talk about is methods, and we're going to get into a lot more about methods in the next class on the 23rd, but we'll talk about instance methods for now, kind of the most basic type. I've already showed you examples of some of them. If you want to add methods that are other than the getters and setters that are, very specifically for just getting and setting those values, you put them down below the getters and setters at the bottom. Now, the reason for that is because the convention generally with getters and setters is to put them right after the constructor. So fields, constructors, getters and setters, and then instance methods. That's typically how it's done. And these are methods that can be called on any object that is an instance of the class. That's why they're called instance methods. So if I have, this class book and I have, my book is a new book, and I set up this object, I can call, my book dot, get title and author, or, my book dot checkout. Let's see, do I have another? Oh yeah, more on this in the next class, as I already said. So in a second, I'm going to actually code some of this stuff, and you're going to see how this all fits together, because you're seeing bits and pieces of a grand plan right now with these examples. The thing about this kind of coding is there's so much code, I can't possibly fit it all on one slide, right? So I'm kind of just trying to give you the overview of the syntax, and then we're about to actually see how it all fits together. To that end, I want to talk about designing classes before I actually live code it, because you're going to do this tonight for your studio. And something important about object-oriented programming is this idea of a single responsibility principle. Every class should define the behavior for its own data. So when you're thinking about this, you kind of think through a lot of different things. You're like, I've got these different objects that are going to relate to one another. Which fields and methods belong to which ones, right? So what fields do I need for a specific class? What are the data types for those fields? Do I need a constructor? Am I going to actually pass in some data to, set some values when I instantiate an object? Or, can I just let it default? What getters and setters do I need? What instance methods are needed? And what are those return types of those methods? What level of access should each field and method have? So you want to think through all of that. So for this thing that I kind of came up with tonight, I have this book class that you've seen. You've also seen the library, a little bit of code on that. And I decided, I'm going to keep it simple. So I've got a title, an author, the number of pages, and then I also have this Boolean available, which is, has it been checked in or checked out or checked in? And so I've got three instance methods that I want for a book object. One is to get the title and author, which will kind of concatenate it together. And one is checkout, which will change available to false. And one is check in, which will change available to true. And then over in the library class, I'm going to have a list of all of the books that belong to the library. And I'll just start with a couple of methods. So, add book will, use the add method to push another book into that array list. And then print available books will get me a nice little readout of which ones are currently available. So this is what we're going to code. And so thinking about the design of this, one of the questions I was off, this get title and author. The first place I thought of to use it was actually in the print available books. It's nice if I'm printing each one out line by line to say, 1984 by George Orwell. So I could concatenate that together, and that's nice. But really, I'm using the title and the author that are data that belongs to the book class. So the best place to put that method is actually in the book class. And this is that single responsibility principle. So, we want to think that through, where's the data coming from? And if that's the data that you're going to be using, and you don't need anything from outside that class to do it, then this is where you should put it. So that's why I chose to put it in the book class versus the library class. And, all in all, there we go. You want to be careful about scope, because it is really, really tempting to kind of, go crazy. You guys already know I'm super extra about things. I think through all of the details, right? And so I can come up with all these oh, if I'm going to add a book, then I should be able to remove a book, and I should be able to do this and do that. I can come up with all these ideas for how far I could take this, but stick to what you need for the requirements at hand. And I'm going to remind you of that again when we talk about what you're doing for studio tonight. But for now, I want to jump over into the coding because I want to kind of show you how this all comes together. So again, this code you see right now is available, will be available. I haven't pushed it yet, but in the main class of this repo, which is the same repo I've been using for the last 2 classes. So I've added this package here, class 3, and I've got 3 classes: book, library, and main. And main is, of course, going to have the main method where I actually execute things so that we can see what the output is. But we're going to start just by setting up these classes that are going to define these objects we need. So the book class is kind of the first place to start. It's the smallest kind of, unit that we need, because a library will have multiple books. So we need to define book first. So the very first thing to do is to declare the fields that are needed. And so I'm going to declare title, author, available, and num pages. And I've got a note here that says available should be initialized to true, because you're creating the book object. It's not in circulation yet. That means it's when it goes into circulation, it's going to be available. So we'll default it to true. So we'll start with and again, we're going to make these private. Because we're going to use getters and setters to actually allow modification of the values or access to the values. So we'll do private string title and then private string author. Oops. And then private Boolean available. And this is the one I said I was going to initialize it to true. And then private int num pages. How many pages are there? Okay, so those are our fields. And now we need our constructors. That's next. So it says define a constructor that takes title, author, and num pages. So this is where we just say public. We don't give it a return type, but we do give it the name of the class. And then we specify parameters. So I've got string title. Wow, okay. There we go. String author and int num pages, but not available because we aren't going to pass that in, and we're going to just, we've already set that by default. And so I'll just do, this dot title equals title, and this dot author equals author, this dot num pages equals num pages. Now, I mentioned earlier that you don't have to use this keyword as long as there's no conflict. So another way to do this, and you'll see this convention out there if you get into Java programming, is to say, some num pages, or an author, a title. You can do things like this to actually make them different. And then you don't actually have to use this keyword, and that will, oops, I have to spell it right though. There we go. Because now there's no conflict. So if I use num pages here, it knows it's referring to this field up here. So that's always an option, is to do it like that. And then I'm going to have this second overloaded constructor that requires only the title and the author. And actually, I'm going to type it out. Okay, so again, public book, and then just string title. My fingers are not cooperating today, guys. And this is where, I can just call the other constructor and say, call this. So it's the main constructor, and just pass in title, author, and 0 for the number of pages. And you'll notice that, IntelliJ is recognizing that I'm referring to that some num pages there that I defined. And that's it. So I have a note here about using the IntelliJ generate feature. We actually technically, your book doesn't talk about it until chapter 5. So I'm gonna go ahead and write one of these by scratch, and then I'm gonna show you how to use the generator. But it's real straightforward, because getting something like, if I just want to get the title, I can say public string, because I'm actually returning a string, get title, And then there's no parameter for that, just calling it. And I can just say, return title. And that's going to go get that the value of that field up there, all the way up here. But if I want to have a setter, I can say, public string set, I'm sorry, not string, void set title. And this is where I do need to specify this title. And then, maybe here again, I use a different name so that I don't have to use this keyword. Because it really, that's all that it is. So you just say, title equals a title. And then we don't have to use this because they're different. So that would be how you just do it from scratch. And of course, you could always decide that you want to make this more restrictive and say, maybe I only want this to be available, from my package. And so then you could just change it to, you could take this off or change it to protected. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and leave it public. So let me show you about this thing. IntelliJ has this thing called generate. And you can go in and say, I want getters and setters. And then I can say, I want, author, and I'm going to use my command key here, which would be control on Windows, and choose both of those. I'm going to skip available because I really only want a getter for that because I'm going to set it differently with some instance methods. So I'm going to say, okay, and boom, I've got get author, get num pages, set num pages. And you'll notice that it defaults to using the this keyword, and that's fine. So really it's just a matter of kind of, what your preferences are. So I'm going to go here just to keep them in the same order that they're in the fields above, right in between these two. I'm going to do generate again. And this time I'm going to say, I just want a getter. And it shows me what I still don't have getters and setters for, which is available. So it creates this one. And remember, I said that for Booleans, the convention is to put is on the front. So it says is available, not get available. And that makes sense because it's going to return true or false. You're asking, is it available? True or false, right? So there we go. We now have getters and setters that, the fields themselves are private. So I can't just go and say book.title, but I can say book.getTitle, and that will, safely make that available from outside this class. All right, so the last thing to do here is to define these instance methods. And I have 3 of them. One is to define get title and author. It's going to return a string that's like, book title by author name, just all, concatenated together. And I've got a note that says it should have default access. So basically that means I just don't put an access modifier on the front, right? I'm just going to go straight to the return type.
Looks so cute.
The return type is string, and then get title and author, and doesn't need a parameter. We're just going.
What was that?
Everybody check your microphones, please. All right, and we're going to return title plus, and I'll just put, space by space plus author. And there's no naming conflicts here, so I can just refer to them directly. And that should take care of that. Something I'm not doing that might seem a little counterintuitive because we've been training you to only code a little bit at a time and then check your work, right? Make sure it works and it's not broken. I'd have to go over into the main, thing and develop that and, test some of this out. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to run right through this and then we're going to get there. But generally speaking, it's a better idea to be testing this, instantiate something, test your methods as you go. Okay, so define a method checkout with public access. So I'm going to say public, and this is a void, no return type, checkout. And there's no parameter, but it says we should change the availability and also print a statement with the title and author name. So I'll say, available, if it's checked out, available now becomes false, right? And then the second thing I want to do is system.out.println. I should have used my shortcut, but I'll do it next time. And, we can say get title and author to have that part, and then maybe like tack on something like, you know, has been checked out of the library. And maybe to make it nice and clean in the console, if we have a bunch of the stuff running together, I'm going to like put an escape character in front of that to force an extra line in front of it. Okay, and semicolon on the end, and we should be good. And then we're going to do something very similar. So I'm just going to copy it for check in. And in this case, we're changing available back to true. And we're going to say has been checked in. I think that'll work. Okay. Grant, got a question?
Yeah, it's more of a general question about classes. So right now we're working with like variables and fields and everything. Is it uncommon to see like a hash map within one of these variables that we're declaring, or is this just an overview? Like in practice, you can get a lot deeper with the data you're using.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in real life, you have all kinds of data coming from databases that has really complex structures. And so you'll be working with data that's got a lot. I mean, I'm keeping it super simple because I'm more interested now in helping you understand how all this stuff fits together. So I'm just using strings and booleans and ints, and you know, but we can definitely look at, and you will be, examples in the future that will help you. In fact, I'll just say this. I might do a video for you guys as like an intro to graded assignment 1, because I don't really have time to do it tonight, but I've been wanting to. One of the things that is a goal for you for graded assignment 1 is to learn how to read other people's code. So those of you who have already, you know, started on it or at least pulled it, you see there's quite a lot of code there. There's a lot going on, and it can be really confusing at first, but this is an important skill that you need to learn before you get out of here. So they're starting you early by saying, we're going to provide a lot of this for you, and you need to read it and you need to understand it. So those are great, you know, opportunities to start to really dig into, you know, more complex stuff for sure. Okay. So let's move on to library now. Now let's go and let me do what I said I was going to do, and like actually like test the book class before we move on to. So, you know, my second to do here is to instantiate 3 books. And this is in the main class. So you can see we're inside this public static void main, you know, the classic kind of special method that allows you to, you know, run the program. So we'll instantiate 3 books. So again, this is all in the same package. All of these files have package class 3 at the top. So that means that the classes are automatically available. So I can just say book, book 1, and I'll say I want a new book, and I'm going to, you know, access this constructor. And you can see it's already popping up. There's 2 possible choices here. I can have string title, string author, int some num pages, or I can have string title, string author. IntelliJ is telling me you've got options here because there's more than one constructor. So I'm going to start with the title, of course. And so let's do, you know, contact, or I'll say again, and, you know, 430 is the number of pages. And then I could do it again. You know, book 2 is new book. And we'll have, you know, Nemesis by Isaac Asimov. And 364 pages. And yes, I pulled these off my shelf and I looked. And then book 3, you know, it says 2 with num pages and 2 without. So I'm going to actually do this one using the other constructor instead, and just do 1984 George, if I can spell it right, Orwell. And I can stop right there, and it's fine because it knows, okay, we're going to use that other constructor and we're going to set num pages to 0. So we can test this just by, you know, so I'm just going to say, you know, test this by printing this. And so like, let's say we do, print book 1 dot get title. And then maybe we do another one that's, book 2, and then call, get title and author. And then maybe I do another one that's, book 3. And I call the getter for is available to find out if it's available. And then I run this. Let's see what happens. Okay, so the first one I get contact, the title of book 1. The second one, it says Nemesis by Isaac Asimov. So it returned that concatenated string from get title and author. And then on book 3, I asked, is it available? And it says true. Mitchell?
Yeah, just real quick. Can you maybe at some point show us the shortcut you enabled in IntelliJ to copy the line down? Because mine was defaulted.
Yeah, it's Command D.
Oh, okay, it's just different than
Just different. I had to look it up because I did not know that the last time I used IntelliJ. But I was just like, I've gotten so accustomed to that with VS Code. I was like, I'm looking that up because it's so helpful. Yeah, so I'm getting in the habit now. But yeah, everything's a little bit different. I think you could probably go back and customize it in the preferences if you wanted to make it more similar. But yeah, Command D. Okay, so we've tested that out. We could also test, setting it. So we could say, book to, check out. Actually, we have that down here, like check out the first book. So let me just go ahead and do that. So book 1, check out. And then we could maybe, then say I want to print book 1 is available to see if it returns false as we expect it to. So now I'm going to run this again. Yeah. So contact by Carl Sagan has been checked out of the library, and then it says false. So there you go. We've got ourselves some, good working stuff in our class, and we're good to go to move on to library. And I know it's 6:30, but we're going to do this real fast. Okay, so for library, we're going to give this private access like we typically do with fields. It's a good idea. So we'll say, books, and actually, I need to create an array list here, and it's imported here at the top. And it's an array list of books. So it's of type book. And then we'll say, we're going to call it books, and then create a new array list. And we can just use an empty constructor there, the default constructor of array list, to just create an empty one. And of course, I chose, an array list because it needs to be flexible. We need to be able to add and remove and all those kinds of things from it. And so it needs to not have a fixed length. So we can't use a regular array. Okay. And then I've got a note here, no constructors required for a library object. We don't need to give right now the way that, as simple as library is at the moment. We don't need any sort of additional information to be set when we create an object of the library. So we'll skip that. And then we're going to just define a public method, add book. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, I lost my place. There we go. Public, and this is void. It doesn't return anything. Add book. There's nothing that needs to, no, that's not true. We do need to pass something in. We need to pass in book, a book of type book. And then we will just take books and say add book. It's that simple, because this add is a method of the array list class. And so we can just say, throw that on in there in the list. And so now it'll be there. And then the last one here is, this is the one that's a little more complex. We want to define a public method, print available books, and it should print only books that aren't checked out. So we're going to have a little bit of logic here. So let's start just by setting up the method itself. Public void print available books. No parameters. And then we'll start with printing a little statement here. I'm just going to say like list of available books. And then I'll actually loop through books. So I'm going to use a for each loop here, and I'm going to say, you know, look at one book at a time out of books. And I made sure to, you know, give book a type. Remember, whatever local variable you set for the loop, you have to give it a type here. And then this is where the logic comes in. I'm going to say if book is available, which should return true or false. Then we're going to print, you know, whatever book it is. And I'm going to tab it in. So I'm going to use that escape character \T. And then I'm just going to say book, get title and author there. And so that should, you know, print this before the loop and then loop through. And if any of them are available, it will list them below. And, you know, we could make this a little bit friendlier for like, well, you know, edge cases. What happens if there are no available books, right? You could print something, but we're not going to because this is a short example. So let's go over to main and get the rest of the things we need in here to test this out. So we're going to instantiate a library object called library. So it is as simple as just calling that default constructor that we did not have to define. So we'll say it's of class library, that's, you know, becomes the type. And then we're going to say it's a new instance of the library class. And that's all we have to do, just like that. And so now we can come down here and add each book to the library. So all I have to do, because, you know, I'm not accessing books directly. I'm actually using the add books or add book method that we created to do this. So I've got these 3 books I created. So let's go ahead and say library.addBook, and then I'll give it book 1, because that expects an object of the book class. That's the way we wrote it. And so then I'll do the same thing with books 2 and 3. And now we should have, you know, all 3 books in there, but we're going to print just the available ones. Which for now, they should all 3 be available because we've only just put them in there. So I'm going to say print available books. So let's run this before we do anything else. I mean, we do have this book1.checkout already, so it's going to print that little statement, but let's see what we've got. Okay, so we say list of available books, and it gives us all 3 of them nicely formatted with our little concatenated statements. And then because we have this next part here, it's telling us that it's been checked out of the library. So now we're going to print available books again to see the difference, that it should, you know, if our method is written correctly, it should only print the other 2, right? So let's do that. Yeah. So after we show that it's been checked out, now the list of available books is only Nemesis and 1984. So now let's say, you know, book 2 check out, and then book 1 check it back in. And now when we print it again, so we'll access the library class to print all the available books. We expect to see the other 2, but not the one that's just been checked out. Yeah, so contact was checked back in, so now it's available, and 1984 is available, but Nemesis is not because it's been checked out now. Does that make sense? I know I went through that really, really fast, but you guys can come back and look at this code again later. But yeah, this is essentially how this works. You know, you define classes, define methods that allow you to, you know, do things with those objects that you create, and then you can manipulate the data. Mina, you got a quick question?
How you wrote the print available books method, or how the logic?
Right, so it just loops through and looks at one book at a time out of the books array list and just checks to see if it's currently available. So it calls that getter that we created. is available. And if that returns true, then it prints out just the title, the title and author for just that book. And it'll loop through and do it for each one.
Thank you.
Okay. I know we're running late on time, so I want to talk about your studio for a second. So let's switch back over to that. And yeah, you guys can definitely look at this more later if you want to kind of review what all we did, because I know it was a lot. Okay, so this studio is called Restaurant Menu, and it's actually a kind of a two-part studio. You're going to do part of it now, and then you're going to kind of build on it in the next class on the 23rd. But the main thing that's important here, let me actually get my slides here. Yeah, the main thing that's important is, dang it, hang on. There we go. Don't start with the code. You want to actually plan it out. You need to design it. So you're going to spend some time, and it doesn't, maybe you're super analog and you want to use a piece of paper. I can be that way, absolutely. Or you want to use a Google Doc or a spreadsheet, whatever it is, to design your classes. You want to lay it out. Ask yourself those questions that I talked about before, like what fields are needed, what data types, do I need a constructor, getters and setters, instance methods, think it through, right? And then once you kind of have things the way that you want for the two classes that you're being asked to do, and we're going to look at those requirements in a second, then create a new package in your project and code those two classes. So all of that is kind of, they walk you through this here. So they're telling you, the menu consists of several menu items. Each menu item should have a price, a description, a category, which would be like appetizer, main course, dessert. And it should be possible to display whether a menu item is new or not. The app should know when the menu was last updated, so visitors can see that the restaurant's constantly changing and adding new, exciting new items. So you're going to think this through. I mean, they're kind of giving you some requirements, but they're not holding your hand through this process because they really want you to think about how you would design it. So work on this and then kind of collaborate with someone and share your ideas. And then you can, actually get to the point where after you've kind of presented it and talked about it with a partner, start to implement something. And so you'll have a project called Restaurant Menu, but, oh, you know what? I was wrong. I said to create it in your Java Web Dev exercises. Don't do that. It says to create a new project altogether. Create a new project in IntelliJ. I will fix that slide. Within the project, you want to create a new package named Restaurant and add your menu and menu item classes. So you're only focusing on just those two classes for tonight. And then for class 4, chapter 5, you'll actually expand this. You'll have a restaurant class and you'll think bigger on how all this fits together. But just do these two for tonight. Okay, so that is it. Again, this is what's coming down the pike. You'll have special stuff going on next week, and then classes 4 and 5 will be the following week. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. You guys head off to studio. Come back here at 8:05. How's that? Okay. All right, I'll see you guys then.